The Novosti is also reporting that, EU will not be able to invest 600 billion in the US, as it was pledged by Ursula Bursular during the Trump, negotiations between Washington and Brussels. Of course, nowadays everybody is talking about this so-called deal that was reached between EU and US, which is basically capitulation sort of EU before US. That's the attitude that many experts have, not just here in Russia, but worldwide, by the way. It's a disgrace what Brussels did, by the way, right? And total betrayal of citizens of EU member states, their interests. It's crazy. It's crazy what has happened. And during that agreement, by the way, Ursula Bursular agreed not just to buy US energy for $750 billion in next 3 years, and to purchase weapons from US for hundreds of billions of dollars, but she somehow also agreed that EU will invest 600 billion into US economy, right? God knows what they meant by this. At this point, it is very difficult to understand what the hell Western so-called politicians or the elites are talking about, right? Or what they mean while saying something. But yes, there was a promise to invest 600 million given to US, and economists are saying that this is not feasible. EU is in no position to invest anything into US, right? Definitely not 600 billion. So European Union will not be able to fulfill its promise to invest 600 billion in the US economy, Politico reported, citing unnamed EU officials. The European Union has admitted it does not have the power to deliver on the pledge to invest 600 billion in the United States economy, just hours after it made the pledge at the landmark trade talks in Scotland. That's because the money would come entirely from private sector investments, over which Brussels has no power, the publication said. So, I mean, what is going on even, right? Public sector, if public sector wants to invest, they will invest anyways, but you're not going to force public sector to invest 600 billion in US economy, right? Because maybe they don't have this volume of money to do it, man. How are you gonna force them? A different story is that due to this contract, by the way, process of the industrialization of European economies will further accelerate, and many hundreds or many thousands even companies in EU territory will have no option but to shut down their productions in Europe and move business to North America or maybe some other part of this world, because if they stay in Europe, they will go bankrupt, because energy cost, which is already tremendously high in Europe, gonna maybe even double, because EU now committed to completely cut ties or their cooperation with Russia when it comes to energy, and they fully rely on US on import from US, right? LNG, oil and gas. And even there, by the way, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do, right? Because reports are that, and same Politico is writing, by the way, that EU promised to buy 750 billion worth of energy from US is also a fantasy, something that cannot be done due to some technical reasons, right? So the European Union's promise to buy 750 billion worth of American energy resources over 3 years to avoid the trade war with the United States is virtually impossible to fulfill, Politico newspaper reported, citing experts. According to the publication, currently limited supplies from the US, technical hurdles, and the Brussels' lack of authority over import deals mean that the target will be incredibly difficult to reach, according to Laura Page, senior analyst at Kepler. The amount proposed by their community is simply sky high and completely unrealistic. EU spent 335 billion euros on energy imports last year, including 76 billion for US energy, meaning the bloc will have to effectively triple its US energy imports over the next 3 years, according to Page, while avoiding other supplies such as Norway, which supplies cheaper gas via pipeline. So now you gonna hit Norway too. This is crazy, man. This is just crazy. According to um, Humayun Falakashi, head of crude oil analyst at Kepler, the EU currently buys 12% of its oil and their fuel from the US. This figure could be increased to a ceiling of 14%, given the EU refineries can only process limited amount of specific US crude behind. This is truly fantastic, the expert said. So, I mean, yes, technically it's not possible. US and the EU have signed deal that cannot be honored by EU. They just are in no position to do this, right? It's a tragic comedy, by the way, what is happening with Europe nowadays. But it again, as long as majority of public is in deep sleep there in Europe, these people are not challenged, right? Western elites in Europe or in North America, they are not challenged, by the way, and they feel free to do any craziness whatsoever, right? And that's what they do. That's what they do, by the way. For example, did you ever see U.S. president being challenged on the matter of these sanctions on Russia or secondary sanctions on or secondary tariffs on Russian allies or the countries that are buying energy, for example, from Russia, energy sources from Russia? Did anybody ever challenge Trump on that? Because you know what? It's not just India or China or Brazil, by the way, BRICS member states that are buying energy, for example, from Russia. It's also US allies, by the way, and US itself. Maybe Trump has no idea about it, but US actually buys Russian oil, maybe in small quantities, but they do buy Russian oil. And most importantly, they buy Russian enriched uranium, by the way. US is a permanent client of Rosatom when it comes to purchasing of enriched uranium for US nuclear power stations. So Trump gonna tariff 100% US itself? I mean, really? And it's not even that. Take a look at the Europe, by the way. So many European countries are continuing to buy Russian energy, right? It's not just Slovakia and Hungary, by the way, that buy Russian gas and oil, and Hungary relies on Russia also in nuclear energy terms, right? But France is one of the biggest buyers of Russian LNG, by the way. Netherlands is one of their biggest buyers of Russian LNG. Spain, right? And many others. So US is willing to also sanction with 100% tariffs these European states, and also Turkey, by the way. No, they're not going to do this, right? And that's why in the beginning of this new segment, by the way, while I was commenting on Trump's ultimatum and so on, I said that I think this is a bluff on part of US. This is just a bluff. They are in no position to actually act on this threat of imposing 100% tariffs on Russian on the countries that buy energy from Russia. They cannot do this, right? They might, after Trump's ultimatum will expire, they might start dancing around the subject and impose some 10% additional tariffs or 20% additional tariffs to try at least on China and India and Brazil or some other countries. They might try, but even that would be too much of a hit on US economy itself, right? So I'm not sure they will even impose that, like 10 or 20% on top of whatever is already imposed, right? So it's a bluff. It's a bluff on part of US. But unfortunately, as I said in the beginning, I'm afraid after this ultimatum will expire, US, UK, France, Germany, and their other NATO member states and their proxy terrorist regime in Kiev will escalate militarily. That's what I expect personally. They're gonna escalate militarily, and I think Russia will have no option but to retaliate, by the way, and this time in such a scale that will eventually will force, after few steps ahead, will force globalist Western ruling class basically to face the reality, come to their senses, and acknowledge that they lost. Right after that, we might see the escalation. Nevertheless, let's continue. When it comes to this US-EU deal, by the way, it's a total disaster for both countries, I will say, especially for both sides. I will say EU is not a country, isn't it? Or tries to act like one. It's a disaster for both sides, especially for EU. And also this report, dear friends, that US tariffs to cost German car giants over 10 billion euros. Germany's leading car makers are set to lose over 10 billion euros in cash flow this year due to US trade tariffs, according to studies cited by the Financial Times. The industry is already contending with their soaring energy costs, failing sales, and intensifying competition from China. So yes, the industrialization of Europe, by the way, will only accelerate. The industrialization of Europe will only accelerate due to this new so-called deal between US and the EU. Hello everyone, I hope you find informative and useful this short clip from main news update, and if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.